Good morning, everybody. My name is Dave Clark. We'll get started, but I just kind of want to test the sound, make sure everybody can hear me. If you can, just put something in the chat so I know that you my voice. Thank you. It looks like maybe we have another one coming on here, so we'll just give it another minute and we'll get started. Hopefully everybody also can see the screen that I've already begun sharing. If you can't, please let me know. You can put it in the chat or unmute yourself and maybe we can figure out what we need to do. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. It's about 10:02, and just to make sure everybody's in the right place, this is a new DBE orientation workshop, part of that series that we're doing in October. This one is going to delve into a little more deeper subjects within the spec book. If the ones that have been on the workshops prior to this, we talked about the spec book, we talked about plans, all those types of things. Now we'll get into them just a little bit deeper. And in particular, we'll talk about mobilization, material allowances, extra work, and traffic control. I expect the workshop to take an hour and a half probably, depending on questions and so forth. So we'll be prepared for that, but I'm prepared to go longer if we need to, not a problem at all. If you notice on the screen down in the lower right-hand corner, I did put a link here for the Eventbrite that IDOT has put up to find all the different workshops that we put on between now and probably about the end of April or end of March into beginning of April. So just keep sure you look at that. We will go to the next slide. I'll actually go to that. The little link here. We'll bring up I'll slide this over as it comes up. So when you click on that link, this is basically what you're going to get. You're going to see that. I would also suggest people who haven't, I would sign up for following. That way you'll get notifications when different workshops are out there. But as you scroll down, you'll see there are different workshops that are already planned. Got the dates and the times for those. The one we're doing today is this one here in the upper left-hand corner, material allowances, mobilization, extra work, traffic control. You can see there's things here for accounting practices, navigating the work website will be a little bit later in November. There's QuickBooks and things like that. So just keep in mind that these are out there. You can see more that are planned by clicking this button at the bottom. Should come up shortly. So you'll see that there are some more that are planned. You'll see they're not yet on sale. There's nothing that you have to buy here. These are all free. Basically what that means is you can't register for them yet. But when that goes away, you can go in. If that's a workshop that you're interested in, get registered. It's all free. The only thing that it costs you is your time. And I know you'll find these all very, very beneficial, especially as new DBEs working with IDOT. Okay. Next slide. What I'm going to do is talk quickly here a little bit about what we're going to talk about here today. As I've said, this is going to be delved a little bit deeper into mobilization, material allowances, extra work, traffic control, that type of thing. Keep in mind, this is just an introduction. There will be other workshops later in the year and into next year that'll go even deeper into a lot of these things. So what this will do is give you a taste of what's there, make sure that you're aware of them, and kind of know where to find information and take advantage of those if you feel the need to do so. This is probably mainly a contractor-focused workshop, but I know consultants who will be like doing construction inspection for IDOT will also gain valuable information to see how these items actually work and things you need to be aware of and how you need to forms and things like that you may need to have to make sure that you comply with all the requirements. One of the first things we're going to talk about is mobilization. And you're going to see here, we'll talk about the spec book quite a little bit. Mobilization is found in Division 600, Section 671. It's also the mobilization payments is in Division 100, Section 109.12. So we'll kind of delve into those. There's been some changes in subcontractor payments over the years, and we'll talk about those. Keep in mind, at the last couple of workshops, I talked about Division 100 in the spec book and being sure that you all read that and understand what's in there, because that's a very valuable section. And when you look at the topics we'll talk about today, Division 100 all comes into play. Next topic we'll go into will be material allowances. Again, in Division 100, Section 109.07, we'll talk about the construction memorandums and some of the forms that you may have to fill out and be aware of for any kind of material allowance that you put in for. Next topic will be extra work. This is also, again, covered in Division 100, Section 109.04. I'm going to probably say this next thing several times throughout talking about extra work, but you must have prior approval before you go doing extra work to ensure that you get paid for it. We'll talk about the different methods of payment, and we'll talk about the construction memorandum and a force account spreadsheet that we've developed for you to be able to put together your invoice to submit to IDOT. The last topic for today will be traffic control. Again, that is in Division 100, but a lot of it in Division 700, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about some of the traffic control standards, and then there's a traffic control field manual that is out there, and we'll get into that as we end the day. What I will say too, I'm probably after each little section, I'll open this up for questions and answer types of things. So if you have questions, put those in the chat. I'll try to monitor the chat. And after each one of these sections, we'll answer any kind of questions we can while we're on them. And then, of course, at the end, we'll be able to go back and look at any of the sections if you want to have questions about them. All right, mobilization. As I mentioned, Division 600, 671 is where you find mobilization. And when you go to the spec book under 671, here's what you're going to find. And, you know, it's basically set up like all other pay items in the spec book. This one's a little bit shorter because it doesn't get into a lot of how you do this, but it does give you the description. And basically what this is for is to help pay for some of that work that you have to do to prepare to be able to actually go out and do the work. You know, this may be movement of equipment, getting personnel to the site, any other supplies that you have. Maybe you need to establish an office on site. So those kinds of things would be what would be included in mobilization. And then it also talked about what the basis of the payment is. It's paid for on a lump sum basis. Have a schedule that they do this. Basically, upon execution of the contract, you get 90% of what you bid for mobilization. And then after 90% of the job is completed, you would get the remainder of that. Now, they do limit this. They basically say 6% of the original contract amount. So let's just take something simple. Let's say you bid $100,000 on a project. So 6% of mobilization would be $6,000. Now, can you bid over 6%? You sure can. And if you do, that extra that's over the 6% will not be paid until that 90% of the contract value is completed. So just keep that in mind. Those are some of the guidelines that they have for that. And it's going to be paid. So for subcontractors, and most of you may not bidding as a prime. It's two different things. If you're a subcontractor to a prime, there are mobilization payments that are due you. Those are outlined in Division 100, Section 109.12. When we look at that, basically, it talks about the same kinds of things in terms of what kind of things would be included in that mobilization. So, you know, it's that movement of equipment, material, personnel, setting up offices, whatever it might be. And then here in the spec book, it says that mobilization payment shall be made at least 14 days prior to the subcontractor starting work. Now, this is one of the things that have changed, and we'll get into that in just a minute. The amount that you get paid is all based on the BC 260A that is submitted to IDOT for approval. And what that BC 260A does is it shows the items that you're working on and what you bid on those. And so that's how they kind of establish what that dollar amount is. And we'll get into the percentages here. In the spec book, it says it's 3% of the amount, but that here again is something that's changed, and we'll talk about that. This mobilization of payment comes to you in advance of you actually going out and starting work. So, you know, it's going to give you a little bit of that seed money to help get mobilized, get your equipment there, whatever it might be. Maybe it's even, you know, buying materials and stuff like that. So keep in mind, those are things that are due to you. If you have a prime contractor that says, hey, I want you to be out there on Monday, you say, hey, I haven't received my mobilization payment yet. When am I going to see that? And, you know, honestly, you really don't have to start until you receive your mobilization payment. Now I'm going to go to that part of the spec book here. Well, actually, this is a memorandum that's changed. I'm going to slide this over. So back in January 2019, they actually changed it from the 14 days to at least 7 days. So keep in mind now that that is no longer 14 days, but it could be. It's just that they have to pay you 7 days prior to you starting work on the project. So that's one of the things that have changed. We talked about that in part of the spec book here. It says 14. That changed with that 7 days. The other thing that has changed back in April 2019, this was revised, is how that percentage of what you're paid based on that BC 260A. If in the original, you saw where it said here, I think I covered it up, but basically it's in this paragraph here, it's 3%. That's now all changed depending on the size of your contract as shown on that BC 260A. And depending on that size, that percentage changes. The smaller the project, less than $10,000 is 25%. If you're over $750,000, it's 7%. But just keep that in mind. If let's say you have a $100,000 contract, you're going to get $12,000 mobilization percentage. So it's $12,000 upfront, 7 days prior to you starting any work on the project. So that kind of covers that section. Is there any questions that anybody has about how that works? Like I said, go ahead, put something in the chat. I think you should also be able to unmute yourself if you want to do it that way. We'll give everybody a minute or two to put questions in there, and then we'll go back to the next section. Okay, I'm not seeing any activity, anybody typing anything yet, and nobody's unmuted. So we'll go ahead then and we'll move on to the next section. Material allowances. This is another one that's covered in Division 100, Section 10907. So I encourage you again, be sure and read Division 100. There's just a lot of things in there that are going to help you and make sure that you're successful when working on any project with IDOT. There's just a lot of things in there, from insurance requirements to material allowances, you name it. So it's something you need to be very, very familiar with. So if I go to that article 10907, it's basically called partial payments, and there's a couple things in there. And I'll just mention the first one under A, progress payments. So just because you have a pay item, maybe it takes you, a month to complete the whole thing. Maybe it's one that just takes a long time. You're setting steel on a bridge deck, for example, maybe, and that's not something that just happens in a day or two. It may take a couple, 3 weeks for you to finish all that steel. Well, the RE can make a progress payment and pay you for what you completed to date. And that's something you want to work out with the resident engineer on the project to get those partial payments. But the one thing we want to talk about today here is material allowances, which I have highlighted here. Keep in mind, this is at the discretion of the department. It's for payment to be made for materials that you may use in completing the work items that you're bidding on. You're going to have to present satisfactory evidence of this material. It meets all the inspection requirements, that it is being made, you've had it shipped, it's stored properly, that you paid for it, all these types of things. Now, there are items too that they're not going to cover. For example, anything that's perishable, they're not going to allow a material allowance. So, let's maybe you're doing landscaping and you're going to be planting trees. Well, there's potential that those could be perishable. So they're probably not going to pay for something like that might not live. Things that would maybe apply might be pipe culverts of some type, either concrete, metal, whatever they might be, rebar, structural steel, aggregates. It just depends a lot on what kind of material it is and when it's going to be used. And now that's another issue that you got to keep in mind. If you're going to be using the material within 60 days when you purchase this, they're not going to do a material allowance for you. But I think we've probably all seen here in the last year or two how prices have changed dramatically. And I know I've worked with DBEs and other contractors even that said, hey, I asked for a quote on this price and I get the quote back and they say it's good for 60 days. Well, let's say, for example, maybe you're doing the rebar on the bridge deck. There's a lot of work that has to go into play. You got to drive pile, concrete. You got to set your I-beams or steel beams, whatever it might be. You got a lot of forming that's got to go, and that job may have been bid in April. They may have started it 1st of June, and your work isn't going to happen until September. Well, obviously that's more than 60 days. So keep that in mind when you're bidding stuff, that if you get a quote and it's more than 60 days, maybe you want to buy that material up front as soon as the project's awarded. As long as it's non-perishable materials, you could do that. And you just want to get that started early, get it turned in, and then what will happen as you'll get a payment for that and start using the material in the project later in the project schedule, they'll start deducting from the material allowance. So you won't get the full amount of the pay item in, but you do get paid in full because you get some of it up front. What else we want to talk about there with that? There is some memorandums out there. One of them is for structural steel. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you're setting structural steel and it's unfabricated structural steel, there are ways that you can get some payment for that up front, because a lot of these steel producers are wanting money up front too. So just keep in mind there is a memorandum out there, number 91, that covers this unfabricated structural steel. It does talk about what has to be provided for you to be able to get that payment. Okay. There's also some of the forms that you will probably see. BC 49 is a Bureau of Construction form. And this is then used to, list what those items are, what the material is, what the quantity is, what the unit price of that is, and the amount. This is something that the resident engineer is also going to sign when they turn this in, and then you have to sign it as an affidavit, and you need a notary public for this as you send that in. Another one is kind of a statement of material allowance. This is kind of definitely what's used as you're going along in the project. You're going to have a list of all your different pay items out here that fall underneath this. This goes with each estimate, so that, whether it's estimate 1, 10, 20, doesn't matter. They're going to put what that estimate number is, and it goes with each estimate. It's going to talk about the units, what the receipted bill was, how much was received, how much was on the BC 49, how much has already been paid for, what still remains in storage. And that's how they determine how much gets deducted off of that material allowance pay item. So what kind of happens here is when you submit for a material allowance, it's approved by IDOT, then that IDOT resident engineer has to do a change order for the project. Basically, they add a pay item, and it's called material allowance. And in that material allowance, a dollar amount is assigned to that. And then when you start doing your pay items, then they start deducting from the material allowance. They pay you for the pay item, deduct the material allowance. And that goes on until everything on the material allowance has been depleted and goes to zero. Okay. Now that kind of covers material allowances. Any questions on that? Go ahead and put it in That, let's see, I got one there. It's confirming what is the name of the prepayment section for materials prior to the project beginning. You mentioned it as being a buffer. So I think I understand what the question is. Basically, when you put in for a material allowance, you've bought and paid for these materials. Okay. And that's another good point too. Once you put in for the material allowance, you do have 60 days to provide proof of payment. So it's not that you have to get it paid for up front. You can get this submitted, get your payment, use that money to pay for the materials, and you have that 60 days to provide that proof of payment. But it is kind of like, I guess you could call it a buffer. It keeps you from maybe experiencing increases in those material costs because maybe, like I say, you're at the very end of the project, and it's going to be way over 60 days. Most projects last longer than that, but it kind of gives you a little bit of a chance, gives you some money up front, gets you to pay for the materials. You got to keep them in storage. IDOT's probably going to come out and look at it, make sure they are properly stored. And then you want to make sure that it's labeled, what job and contract it's for. That way nothing gets taken out of it and goes to some other project, because if IDOT ever comes out and looks, and they will from time to time, make sure the stuff is still properly stored and still in storage. If it's not there, then they're going to take it off. But it kind of helps you, get some money, pay for your materials, and not worry about having any material cost increase over that life of the contract. I know there's a lot of subcontractors that do like steel rebars, that they'll buy that rebar up front, store it somewhere, sometimes on site, sometimes in a storage yard for that. I've also seen subcontractors that do drainage items, pipe culverts and stuff like that, get those bought up front, even though it's maybe a while before they start putting in some of these pay items and the pipe culverts. They got it there, it's stored, and they can get the material paid for up front, not worry about any cost increases. Terry, does that answer your question? Don't see any other questions, so we'll go on. We'll move on to the next topic. Okay, extra work. Here again, Division 100, Section 10904, payment for extra work. Now, we'll open up that section here in a little bit, but basically there's two methods to receive a payment for extra work. It could be a lump sum price. It could be some other kind of agreed unit price, by the ton, by the cubic yard, square yard, lineal be. And then there's a thing that it's called the force account basis. So this is kind of a cost plus basis, and this requires that you would submit a invoice to IDOT for their approval. I put this in red here. I just want to emphasize this. You just can't emphasize this enough. I've known of a couple that went ahead and did some work before they had prior approval, and it took a lot to finally get paid for it. So do not any extra work on a project until you have the approval to do so. Very, very important. Now you have to bear with me here. Some of these links, when I go, it says Division 100, it doesn't go exactly to that article. I have to find it and to get it there, but we'll go to that first one. Comes up. Navigate to it here. 04. Bear with me, we're getting there. Slide this over, make it a little bit bigger, and then we can, still not quite there. 8. Oh, 904. All right. So here, this will give you a little bit more information when you go and you're reading that Division 100 and go to Article 10904. It talks about that lump sum or agreed unit price. And this is something, if you decide to do it that way, and the RE and the Department of Transportation is willing to look at it from that, in that perspective, what you would do is develop an agreed unit price or a lump sum price. You would then, in writing, submit that to IDOT for their approval. They're gonna want to see your backup information on how you got to that price, and be adding that to the contract as either a lump sum or agreed unit price. If that's not something that either party wants to do, the force account basis is the other method that is used. And like I say, this is basically a cost plus type of method of doing that. You're going to have to fill out an invoice for that and submit that to IDOT. On your invoice, you're going to outline your labor, and we'll look at the Excel sheet that we put together here in a little bit. All your bonds, insurance, taxes, all that kind of stuff. You're going to list the materials that you use. You're going to list the equipment that's on there. But you can see there's a lot of different things that could get paid for. Maybe, like, for example, disposal fees. Maybe you got some hazardous waste type of thing that requires a special disposal fee, and you're doing this on a cost plus basis. Well, those things are also reimbursable. And there may be other miscellaneous things. It talks about the statements, which kind of like your invoice, what you got to put on those. And like I said, we've tried to make that a lot easier, and I'll show you where you can find that spreadsheet. And it's pretty easy to fill out, and it's in the format that IDOT likes to see. So that's where you read about that. Article 10904 is going to take care of basically what extra work that you may do on a project, and just be sure you have approval in writing before you do that work. Next one I want to bring up is we have a couple construction memorandums out there. We'll look at memo number 4 here. To the top. All right, construction memorandum number 4. Basically, this kind of outlines those contract changes, and this wouldn't just be extra work. This might be, increases to a planned quantity that's out there, or maybe even a decrease to a planned quantity. But this talks about who has the approval of those, how that approval can be done, the authorization for those changes that has to be turned in. And the one reason I wanted to kind of talk about this is, for any change, whether you're adding a material allowance, whether it's increasing the quantity on a pay item that you bid, whether it's adding a force account item, because you're doing it on a cost plus basis for some extra work on the project, you're gonna have that BC 22, that authorization for contract changes, turned in and approved before you'll be able to get paid for any of those changes. So it's very important. Make sure that you stay in contact with that resident engineer. That the material allowance, he's turning in that BC 22, so that's there and you're going to get the money. If your planned quantities increased, until they increase those quantities and they're approved in the contract, you may complete the work, but you're not going to get paid for those increases until that authorization is approved. So it's real important to stay in touch with that resident engineer anytime you're doing work above and beyond what's in the contract, that they're turning in these authorizations for contract changes and getting it approved so that you can get your payment. Otherwise, you could be waiting weeks, maybe months sometimes to see your money. And I've seen this happen to many, especially DBE subcontractors, where they got approval to do the work, they went and did the approval, but the resident engineer didn't do the authorization for that, and so there's no money out there to be able to pay that. And let's just take another example. So let's say this is work that's not outlined at all in the contract, so it's extra work. And we'll just take the hazardous waste example. They find hazardous waste that wasn't outlined in a contract, and they've hired you or approved you to be able to go ahead and remove that hazardous waste all from the site and dispose of it. You're going to want to make sure that he's turned that authorization in when he gave that approval for you to do the work. Otherwise, if you wait until you're done, you may not see any payment for weeks or months. They can put something in, not knowing, maybe you don't know exactly what the total bill is going to be, but you can think, hey, I think it's going to be somewhere around $10,000. They can put an authorization in for an estimated amount of $10,000 that can cover that additional work. If it goes over that, then yeah, they'll have to add to it. But if it doesn't, then the money's already there to pay you for all the work that you do. And as you start going over the amount that maybe was pre-authorized, you want to make sure that they authorize more to make sure that you get timely payment, because some of these things can be very, very costly, and you could be left out there hanging with a huge bill to pay and not having seen any payment yet. And it does take a little while for them to process these authorizations and for it to show up on a pay estimate. So keep that in mind. All right, let's pull that off to the side. We'll go to construction memo number 9. Bring that one up here now too. So this gets more into that force account billing and how that has to be done. And it talks about how that's supposed to be structured. And as I say, the next thing we'll touch on will be that Excel sheet, which is set up following this memorandum, covering all the things that they're going to require to see. You're going to make sure any bill that you turn in that you attach what's called a BC 635. Now, this is a daily report for any extra work that's done. You want to make sure that you get those and a copy of those on a daily basis. Whoever that inspector, that resident engineer is on the project, daily, you want to get with them, make sure they have a list of all the people that were on the project, what their category was, what their rates are, all that kind of stuff. Any materials that you used, any equipment that you used, any other fees that you might have had is all listed on this daily report, because that's what they're going to use to check your bill that you submit, and that's what you're going to use to create your bill. It goes on and on here, talks about all the unemployment taxes and stuff, and we put some links on the spreadsheet that can help you with that. There are different kinds of equipment. Maybe you have equipment that's already on a job site that's owned by you. Maybe you got equipment that's owned by you, but it's still in your yard. You got to move it there. So, you can get paid for that work to be able to bring that equipment to the site. If it's on the site, that'd be a little bit different. It's already there. You're going to have to supply proof of what the rates are that you're charging. So that's another thing you're going to have to be sure and get. If it's rental, and that's another thing, if you have to rent a piece of equipment, and maybe it's something that's very specialized, you'll go to a rental company, you'll get the rate from them, and that's going to be what you're going to use as your documentation for that. As we go on down here, it starts talking about the preparation of that bill. Here again, you're gonna want to have what that authorization number was with that force account. It'll be a FRC number. It'd be 8 digits. So you'll have the first 3 will be FRC, then you'll have 5 digits after that. And that's the numbers that you're going to want to put on those extra work data reports. That pretty well kind of covered. But this outlines, what has to be done, things that you need to be aware of, and things that you're going to have to submit to IDOT in order to get paid. Okay, so now I mentioned that we developed a spreadsheet. There's a lot of contractors that have their own spreadsheets, but this one's one that we put on the IDOT website. It's free to anybody that wants to use it. It's a blank, as you see down here. The last time we updated it was basically about a year ago. And so there's nothing right now that we're aware of needs to be updated. But if you will click on this, And it'll take you straight to that particular Excel sheet. Now, this also, like I said, can be found on the IDOT website. And like I said, that's the link that you can use. It'll take you right there. Let me scroll up on this a little bit. So basically on this spreadsheet, and we do have some instructions, they're pretty simple. Anything in the white cells is where you're allowed to enter data. Anything that's not a white cell, you're not going to be able to enter anything. There's formulas on here that are protected, so it's calculating things correctly. But if there's anything within this spreadsheet that maybe doesn't quite fit your company, maybe there's a certain, I don't know, bond or insurance rate or something that doesn't quite fit your company, we put our phone number here. You can give us a call. We can go in and make adjustments for that, and we have done that in the past for other companies. All right, going back to that tab where the sheet's at, basically you're putting in all the contract information, what the authorization number is. That's one thing you got to make sure you get. You're putting in here, you know, what the week was, who prepared it. For unemployment taxes and stuff, we do have a website here for that, the state unemployment tax. One of the things that you're going to put in is what that limit is, and you'll get that from that website for the year that you're working. Put in a description and location of the work that was done, and then you're going to list every single one of the people you had on there, what their trade is. You're going to put in how many hours they had each day, how many of those were straight time hours, how many were overtime, double time, whatever it might be, and you're going to put in their pay rate. And this is going to calculate that automatically. Now, what happens is there's this earnings to date, and you're going to have to look at, you know, what you've paid them to date and enter that in here, because that will be controlled by the state unemployment tax. And once you reach a certain level, then you won't have anything for the state and federal unemployment that you'll be putting in there. But that'll all be calculated automatically for you once you've entered all their time and their earnings to date. As we scroll on down here, you can see we've got several, you know, the major unions out there: laborers, operators, carpenters, cement finishers, electricians, iron workers, teamsters. You know, maybe there's somebody, maybe there's plumbers. Okay, we didn't put plumbers. That doesn't get used too often, but if there's something like that that we need to add, we can go in there and add it. But these are the main ones that you normally see. It's going to calculate their hours, total that up, and put that in here. Also, we do have a link here for that construction memorandum number 9. We put in a lot of the percentages here for some of these unemployment and things like that. But your workman's comp rate, those are probably all different for every contractor. So that's something you're probably going to have to get from maybe your insurance provider to be able to put that in there. To certify here that this statement complies with your payrolls that you submit on a weekly basis. You're going to list your equipment here. We've broken this out into equipment that's owned by you and also equipment that you rent. So that it's just a little bit different on how it's entered in here. And if you had some kind of subcontractor helping you on something, that you would put their expense in here. Materials go down in here. Any like maybe fees, things like that can go in here also. And then you have an affidavit that you go to Republic that would calculate that. You're going to put your bond rate in down here. And so all this kind of complies with that construction memorandum number 9 that IDOT put out. So this is something that you can use. It's already developed. But like I say, if there's something that doesn't quite fit your company the way it should, let us know, and we can make those kinds of adjustments for you. Okay. Is there any questions on that portion of it? So go ahead and throw something in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, feel free to do so.
Morning, Dave. I have a question here. With me adjectives, how would I be able to price that out? Would I price it out by the price of the tons, or another example would be some debris from a demolition project? How would you list that?
Well, say like debris for a demolition project, and if this is something that they've added to the project and you're doing it on a force account basis, maybe you have a disposal fee, so you're going to add that disposal, and you're going to have your trucking cost, and whatever those would be, um, inloaders or whatever load the trucks, any backhoes help tearing, busting up the concrete or whatever it might be. I mean, you're going to list every single thing that was associated with that, your ability to complete that item. Let's say there's a concrete bunker, so to speak, that's found that nobody knew that was there, and now they want you to remove it. That would be something that is above and beyond what the original contract was. So you got to bust up this concrete. It's probably got rebar in it. You're going to use probably some kind of a backhoe with a breaker on it, break that up. All that gets included in there.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and then loading it into trucks, all your trucking costs, and maybe that's your subcontractor. Maybe you don't do the trucking, and you've got a subcontractor that does the trucking for you. So you'll put that in there. You'll attach the bill that they give you for that trucking.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Profit and overhead you can add for overtime on a force account invoice. I believe that is automatically, let me go back here. Went the wrong way. I believe, she went too far. That is outlined on here. So, yeah. So like for, your all your labor and stuff, you get to add 35%. So when that's all calculated out, that 35% is calculated for you and added in here. And then as far as your like workman's comp, unemployment insurance and stuff like that, you get to add a 10% for that. And here again, once you've entered all this information in up above in the white, then that's automatically going to be calculated for you in this form. Does that answer your question, Joanne? Any other questions that anybody has? Says, and most everybody probably can read it, on the tollway work, they do not let you add anything. And I dealt with the tollway. I know it's a whole different animal. It is part of state government in reality, but it is a completely different thing from the Department of Transportation. So yeah, you just have to follow what their requirements are if you're working on the tollway. And I'm not familiar with what those are. Good point, though. That's a good thing to keep in mind. Depending on who you're working with, there may be different requirements on how you do things. So be sure you comply with all their requirements. But what I'm trying to do today here is address things that make you successful in working with IDOT. Okay. Seeing any other questions? Let's move on then. Back. Okay. Traffic control. Another thing that's extremely important. Yes, you may have a job that you can be out there and it'll be completely away with traffic, and you're not going to hardly need anything. But if you're a prime, you're probably always going to have a sign that says road construction ahead, that type of thing. I've personally built projects that were out in the middle of nowhere, where complete new alignments and very little traffic control was required for those. You did have to assign any side roads that intersected with that road, but it's very minimal compared to what it is if you're, say, going down an interstate and doing work on an interstate and what you're going to have to do for that. So just keep in mind here again how important the traffic control is. And when you show up on the job, make sure you have with you the traffic control things that you're going to need, whether it be barrels, cones, signs, barricades, whatever it might be. Make sure you have those, or maybe you've agreed with that prime contractor that they're going to provide it. Whatever that might be sure everything is in place when you arrive on the project and it's ready to go. You never want to be out there on the road and not have the proper traffic control. And maybe you're just providing a flagger for the work that you're doing. Make sure they have all their proper equipment, signs, stuff like that, for each one of your flaggers that you put out there. As I mentioned, we have most of this stuff that we're talking about today is also covered in that Division 100. And if we go to Division 100, I have to probably get to the right one here, but this one is that Article 10709, Section 10709. And we're getting there. Bring it over here shortly to find it. I'm a little past it, so we'll move on up. 10709. All right. So what's covered here is what's called public convenience and safety. And really, it's for the safety of the public, traveling the roads, walking the sidewalks, whatever it might be. But it's also is talking about your workers and your equipment and stuff. And you just want to make sure that you're operating safety, you have everything in place. One thing that it talks about here is holidays and stuff like that. And when those are observed, there'll be notices that IDOT puts out prior to holidays about everything has to be off the road by a certain time on a Friday, and you can't go back out on the road until a certain time on Sunday. So basically after midnight on Sunday, it'd be Monday morning. But it outlines what those are, and you need to be aware of those, that you may not be able to work around a certain time on a holiday, depending on the kind of work that you're doing. If it's something, like I say, that it's completely a new route, it's off that, you can work there on that because you're not interfering with traffic. Other things that may come into place, maybe you're doing some work that now causes a horizontal or vertical clearance issue. Maybe you're working on a bridge, for example, and you put a barrier wall out there, and now the clearance on a horizontal basis is only 12 feet. And it's very important to establish what those are, have all the proper signs up and so forth. Make sure that the resident engineer has submitted that to the IDOT central office, because what they do is they use that information for low clearances, with clearances in their permitting operations. So, if you have a wide load that comes through your project, or an extra tall load, and you've created a clearance issue there, they're not going to be able to get through. And now what's happened, you've got a wide load sitting there in the middle of the road, maybe stuck under your bridge if it's too high, and it's got traffic all backed up. And it's just not something that you want to get into a position of having happen. So making sure that you that the RE on the projects recorded any low or width clearance issues. The permit office has those because they do follow those, and they know where those are at. They'll find alternate routes for those loads to take. So those are some of the things that you're going to find under that Article 10907. But like I said, one of the main things, just be familiar with some of those holidays there. Understand that this is for the public safety and safety of your workers on that job site. Okay. That off. I know this says Division 100, but that's just the way that link come up. But Division 700 is where you're going to find a lot of the traffic control things. And give me a couple minutes here to get to that section. Okay. Be real close here. All right. So I bring that over. So we have that Division 100. Here again, it's basically set up like all your pay items within the spec book. It's going to give you a description. Here again, it's basically just a one-line description. It's going to talk about different materials that can be used, talk about different equipment that can be used on this, signs, cones, barricades, drums, whatever it might be. They're going to give you kind of general requirements of that. There's things in here about maximum length of lane closures, minimum lane widths, and those types of things. A lot of tables in here in this section too, depending on what the speed might be on the roadway that you're working, if there's any drop off between lanes, what kind of signs are required, and any what those depths changes might be. You're going to find things about operation of equipment. If let's say you're working on an interstate and you're wanting to use one of those median crossovers, there's information about here about how that can be done. Surveillance is also covered here. So a lot of times you got traffic control out there, you're going to have to perform nighttime surveillance to make sure that the lights are operating properly, message boards, arrow boards all operating properly. Make sure that barricades or barrels haven't been hit, that need to be set up. So this is something you also need to be aware of, that there is a surveillance item associated with traffic control. It also talks about equipment and parking and storage, what you can do and what you can't do in terms of leaving equipment on the job site in open lanes, or not open lanes, but even closed lanes. Talks about personal protective equipment that you want your workers to have. Talks about flaggers and the requirements for them. They're going to have be a certified flagger. They should have an ID with them, and don't be surprised that there's somebody with IDOT that may come out and check them from time to time. Every district has a traffic control supervisor, and not only do they look at their own maintenance work zones and how those are set up, but they also come around and they look at all the work zones, and they're looking to make sure that the signs are placed properly, that the barricades are up, that the lights are working. They'll do nighttime surveillance of these. So just be aware of that type of thing. Like I say, there's a lot of information here about flaggers. It gets into the signs and the type of signs and so forth. In here, you're going to have things about the different kinds of posts that can be used, mast arms for signal heads, pavement markings, all those types of things are going to be covered in the section 1700 of the spec book. Go ahead. Okay. Somehow we got slides moved here. We'll get the right place. All right. Traffic control. I think it was the last workshop we did. We talked about highway standards, and so we'll go to that. Just revisit that again, so everybody's familiar with that. So when you click this link, and by the way, everybody will get a copy of this presentation, and there'll also be a recording that'll be made available to everybody. But in terms of highway standards for traffic control, I would always go here to your individual highway standards. You can click on that. As we looked at that last week, there's a lot of different highway standards here. But if you remember what I said, first three digits of that pay item correlate with your standards, correlate with the spec book. So we're looking for those 700 standards. And as you see, they're starting to come up here. So there's a lot of standards here. And a lot of the traffic control that you're going to use are going to be a 701. Highlighted there now, all the ones associated with that. There's all different kinds of situations, there's off-road kind of stuff. There's things for lane closures, two-lane, two-way. There's lane closures on freeways. There's things with barrier that you may need. It depends on whether it's a stationary, maybe it's a moving operation that you have. For example, an asphalt paving operation, maybe something moving, or if you're putting down aggregate shoulders, that could be a moving operation. It's not only just for like those rural two-lane roads and interstates, but there's also standards in here for those urban lane closures. And those are going to be different than what you're going to see. And we'll open up a couple of them to just kind of take a look. One thing I also mentioned, let's say you're doing sidewalk. There is a standard for sidewalk closures. And say you're tearing out sidewalk on one side of the street, you're going to have a sidewalk closure. And you're going to set up the traffic control for that, because it's not just for motor vehicles, this is also for pedestrians. Let's just pick a couple of these. I'll just pick, let's do this one with the bridge repair. So when you click on that, that's what it kind of looks like. Gives you the locations of all your signs, gives you your taper lengths, all those types of things, gives you spacing between the signs. Just keep in mind that when you're placing signs, and hey, maybe you got to make that, instead of 500 foot, maybe you got to make it 550, so that it's in an area that is easily visible and is not hidden by some other thing, a tree or another sign or so forth. So just keep that in mind. Work with the RE on the project in advance on where those are going to be set. A lot of times they're going to go ahead and mark those out where they want them. They'll mark out a lot of times where they want that taper to be, and so forth. But just keep in mind, here's kind of what those things look like. In this case, there's also signals that you may need. So there's a lot of different things can be involved with traffic control. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you have the right standard for the work that you're performing. Act like that every time. That one here, let's just look at one on a freeway. So here's one on a freeway. This would be, as I go scroll down, you'll see here, this is a lane closure, day operation only. So this is not for nighttime. So you're just closing down a lane. You got a work zone. Maybe this is, or some kind of a patching repair that's only for daytime, that you're going in and removing the patch and filling it and opening it up that very same day. Here again, it's going to give you your locations of your signs, your taper lengths, all those kinds of things. Keep in mind, there is these symbols down here. It talks about arrow boards where the work zone is. They've also, over the years, have added things. You'll see that they change, make revisions from time to time. Last revision here was made January 1, 2022. So just this past January. I don't know exactly what all they added here, but one thing I do note that it's new. They show a little stick man in here that you got workers in the work zone. And then you have what they call a spotter. Now, this may be a flagger, but it's somebody it's kind of basically a spotter for the workers there. They're watching the traffic, making sure that nobody, comes flying through some of the barrels and barricades and starts to enter the work zone. So they're to be watching for that, warning the workers, make sure that there's no accidents that would happen. So that's kind of one of the ones that there. Let's look at the one down here for sidewalks. I went past it. Yeah. Now let's look at an urban one. Let's look at a two-lane. So here's an urban one, all one direction. So kind of, what lanes closed, barricades, workers. You got the little dot here. That's your flagger that you're going to have. So just a little bit different. Since this is one lane, you don't have signs in both directions. I go back and I pick one of the others down there. I wish this would just go right back to where you're at, but it doesn't. Okay. So here's one that multi-lanes urban situation. You got a bi-directional turn lane in the center. So this is kind of showing, how you handle that when you're working there. You're going to be basically closing off 3 lanes, that center bi-directional turn lane and the 2 adjacent lanes, and funneling everybody down to 1 lane. But you can see the difference where you have signs in each direction. And I'll emphasize again, spacing, they'll show spacing here, but that could vary just depending on what's there. There's just a lot of things in an urban area. There are signs, power poles, things like that. And you just don't want anything hiding any of the signs that you're putting up. All right, and we'll go back, we'll just look quickly at that one for sidewalk, because I know there's a lot of DBEs that do sidewalk. So here's an example, one of those where, we're actually, you can see we're doing work on a sidewalk here. So people can't walk and go through here, same way as what's shown down here. There's gonna be signs that say sidewalk closed. You're gonna put a sign down here at the intersection, having them go across to the other side and use the sidewalk on the other side. So just keep in mind, you have that kind of thing for sidewalks also, especially in those urban areas. All right. What I want to also note here, we talked about these. This is a 700 section. The 701 basically is all your traffic control kind of things. There's one just for different traffic control devices, but there's still other 700 section things that are here. I'm just going to highlight those. And what most of these are, you get your traffic temporary concrete barrier that may be needed, different sign panel details, how to erect them, the posts that be used, different reflectors, things like that can be used. And then it also talks about the pavement markings, curb reflectors, guardrail reflectors. You may be doing say you're a guardrail contractor, you put in guardrail. Well, it's a different thing for the reflectors that go on that guardrail. So here's where you'd find that standard for a guardrail reflectors. Guardrail itself, though, is a 630 number, and those are up in this area, up in here. Talks about the different kinds of guardrail end sections and so forth. So just keep in mind anything that has to do with reflectors, pavement markings, signs, things like that. It's going to be found in that 700 section. Okay. Last thing here on this section I want to talk about is this traffic control field manual. And note I put on here, this is for IDOT employees. It was developed back in 2016. Yeah, it's for IDOT employees, but it's something, to be aware of. We'll go to that. And I'll pull that over here now. Get right to the beginning of it. And it does say for IDOT employees, but it's something that I think it'd be good for, say you're a traffic control subcontractor and you're setting up signs and barricades and stuff. There's just a lot of things in this manual that are good to know. Give you guidelines for your portable message boards and your flashing arrow boards, traffic for your temporary barrier, things like that, drop off guidelines. It's kind of a manual that you can have out there in the field with you to look at. I can guarantee you that traffic control supervisor in each district, they're using this, and I guarantee you that the resident engineers and inspectors that are on the projects, they have access to this, and they're looking at that in terms of how your traffic control is set up. So, it's something to be aware of that's out there. That link will take you directly to this. They have a lot of things about definitions that you'll hear IDOT people use that are on the standards, that are in the spec book. So kind of good to maybe read this, be aware of what the requirements are. We go on down here. It's about the temporary things, some guidelines for putting those things in, that type of thing. So here again, there's a manual that's out there. Yeah, it does say for IDOT employees, but something there that's on the IDOT website, something that you can use. If you're a consultant, you're doing work for IDOT as an inspector on a project, and you're maybe in charge of doing the traffic control inspection. It's a good manual to be aware of and be able to use that when you are out there on the job site. Okay. This has gone fairly quickly today. It's into this. If there's any questions on that last section or any questions on the previous ones, feel free to unmute yourself, ask the question, or if you want to just put it in the chat, I'll monitor that chat and we'll go over those questions if anybody has any. While I'm kind of waiting to see if somebody has some, I'll go to the last slide that I have, talk about that. As I mentioned, my name is Dave Clark. I'm with ESI Consultants. We are your DBE Technical Supportive Services contract consultant. We handle everything all over the state of Illinois, districts 1 through 9. I have several people up in the District 1 area that there's a lot of activity up there, but Vinu Patel, Kevin Hayes, Brent Zittner, all in that District 1, 2, and 3 area. Tina Bond, she's more assists our consultants that are DBEs, especially if you have questions on EPAS system, getting pre-qualified, stuff like that. Tina's kind of our go-to person on that. And plus I always can help with that too. But probably the thing to do, contact me. I got my email address. There's an office number. Cell number is probably the easiest way to find me because I'm all over the place. As you can imagine, districts 1 through 9, a lot of traveling there. But contact me, send an email, give me a call. We'll kind of look at what your needs are, what your questions are, and then determine who might be the best person to help you. And then I'll have them get in touch with you. We also have, oops, what happened? Well, Sharon, but now I need to go to the last one again here. Get there. So we also do have some subcontractors that work with us up in Districts 1, 2, and 3. We have NIDA Engineering Solutions. Don Miller kind of heads up that group. Laura and Todd work with him. So, if you're already working with any of these people, feel free to reach out to them directly. But if you haven't worked with us before, give me a call first, and then we'll figure out who might be the best group to help you. If you're in districts 4 through 6, we have Herman and Associates. Alicia Herman heads up her group. Just like I say, get a hold of me. If you work with Alicia, feel free to contact her directly. Down in District 7, 8, and 9, it's EFK Moen. John Scheibel heads up that group. Jeff Church helps him. Anybody from those districts may recognize those two names. Longtime employees of the state of Illinois Department of Transportation. Very good resources for anything in the construction area. But feel free, like I say, you'll get a copy of this, but reach out to us. I mean, we don't know if you need help if you don't let us know. So it's kind of the ball's in your court. Contact us and let us know that you need some help. And let's see. Look at some of these that are in the chat here now. Can you advise where you can find this and other presentations from your office? Yes, presentations are going to be sent out to you. So you'll get a notification of this. You'll get a copy of the recording. You'll get a copy of this presentation. That'll come from IDOT. They are also storing those on their website. And I'm not sure of what that location is, but we will find out exactly how you can access those. And I'll get that to you. I noticed, well, let's see, Melissa's no longer on, but Melissa might know, but I know IDOT's going to be putting those on their website also so that other people can have access to them. Any other questions anybody has? I guess I will also mention, while we're waiting for more questions, we do the technical supportive services. There are groups that do the what they call management supportive services. So if you're needing help with QuickBooks, bonding, those kinds of things, there are consultants that are helping with that, and they'll be giving some of the presentations later on as we go through this workshop series this winter. But Ringgold and Associates up in the 123 area. So we've got Mark Vaughn, Franklin Vaughn there down in District 7 through 9. Melissa Hamilton, she's in Districts 4 through 6. Melissa also helps with certification. And if I'm not mistaken, Mark Vaughn down in 7 through 9 helps with certification. But up in Districts 1, 2, 3, will join her. He would help anybody with getting certified, expanding your categories and certification. And I noticed Theo's on the presentation here today. So if you're looking to expand your categories and as certified DBE, talk with Theo up in Districts 1, 2, and 3. If it's District 4 through 6, get a hold of Melissa Hamilton, and down in 7 and 9, get a hold of Mark Vaughn. So, not seeing any other questions. This has gone a little quicker than I had anticipated. We're about an hour and 15 minutes into this, but I'll leave this up here for a while. I'll stay on here. If anybody's got any further questions, like I say, you can unmute yourself, ask them that way, or just put it in the chat. Thank you very much for attending today. And
Hey, Dave,
yes, sir.
I have a question. Regarding back to mobilization,
Okay.
will the subcontractor have to put mobilization on their bid, or do they automatically get mobilization?
Let's go back to that slide. Let me stop this here. I will just go back to it. Back to where that payment's at. Okay. So as he has, that's Theo, by the way. This is going to be based on what you put in your bid, which will show up on that BC 260A. You don't have to bid mobilization, but you're going to want to put that into your cost for your pay items. Okay. You're going to, let's say you're doing sidewalk, and if you didn't have mobilization, you bid it at $6 a square foot. Well, my mobilization it's going to cost me 50 cents a square foot. So my bid's going to be $6.50. And then whatever that, if it's 1,000 square feet, it's $6.50 times 1,000. So that's $6,500. So that would show you've got something that's less than a $10,000 contract. You're going to get 25% of that $6,500 as your mobilization up front. And then they'll pay for that. But you'll never get paid for more than 6,500 square feet of sidewalk. It's just you get that mobilization payment up front based on what your bid price is for that pay item. How's that answer it?
Well, let me explain why I asked that question.
Okay.
Because sometimes primes may not pay subcontractor mobilization costs because it's not in the bid. There's no line item that they have. And that's why I asked, should they have a line item on their bid for mobilization in order to get paid for mobilization?
The way I understand it, no, you do not have to have a mobilization pay item. It's based on pay items that you bid and what is shown as that total on that 260A. Could you bid mobilization? Yeah, I don't see why you couldn't.
Okay.
The way I understand it, it's not something that would be required. They have to pay you mobilization based on the amount, on that total amount on that BC 260A. That could include mobilization. It can include sidewalk. It could include guardrail. It could include whatever it might be. And then that's based on that percentage that's in that table that is on the screen right now.
Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. I will emphasize too that, I've heard this where, oh, I haven't got any mobilization payment. Well, according to the specs and the construction memorandums, they are responsible for doing that. Thing is, I would also say you're responsible to make sure you get it. As a subcontractor, you're going to want to make sure that, hey, you want me out there on this date? Okay, I haven't received my mobilization payment yet. So as soon as I get that mobilization payment, which has to be 7 days prior to you beginning work, then I'll begin work within 7 days.
One more question then.
Okay.
What happens when a contractor doesn't show up to start work because he or she hasn't got mobilization and they have a controlling item and it throws the job off? Can they be penalized for liquidated damages?
Question, Theo. I'm sure that would go into some litigation. Be my guess is what would happen there. Um, my thought would be, hey, Prime didn't do what they're responsible to do. It's just kind of like you as a subcontractor. Every week you have to submit your payrolls. Every month you got to submit your EEO form, and if you don't do that, IDOT can say, I'm not paying you because you haven't submitted all the proper documentation, or you haven't submitted the proper material inspection for a payout. Okay, well, I'm not going to pay you because I don't have the proper inspection for that pay item. To me, it's a little bit of the same thing. You're working for that prime contractor. They're required by specification to pay you 7 days in advance of doing any work on that project. And that's why I'm saying it's also part of your responsibility as a sub to say, hey, I need my mobilization payment. You want me there in 5 days? I'm not going to be able to make it in 5 days because I didn't get my mobilization payment. But you kind of want to be ahead of the game. You want to stay in touch with those prime contractors. You want to know what the schedule is because things change. Sometimes the schedules get moved ahead. Things go quicker than they anticipated. Sometimes things get moved back because of some delay in materials, maybe delay in a utility that was in the way. But it's always important to stay in contact with that prime contractor, know what the schedule is, know when you're expected to be there. And at that time, tell them, hey, I need my mobilization payment and I need that 7 days prior to really starting work. So you're putting a little bit of pressure on them. Hey, you want me there in 7 days? Then give me my payment. That's how I would approach it. And that's something, like I said, that's very good questions. Another thing I say is things we can help you with. We're not just helping you with estimating and bidding. We're not just helping you with pre-qualification. If you've got a construction issue in the field, get a hold of us. We'll come out in the field. We'll help you. If you're found out you got to start next Monday on a project, give us a call. One of us will meet you out there. We'll be there on the site with you that day. Make sure everything goes right. I would even say once that prime contractor calls you and says, "Hey, I want you out there next week on this day to do this work." That's a good time. That's kind of a clue. Maybe I better make a visit to that project site right now. Are they really ready for me? Do they have all the work that needs to be completed for me to be able to do my work? That way, they're ready. They know you're ready to go. You know what you're going to need. We'll go with you. It's just a matter of making a phone call, say, hey, I want to go out and take a look at this, make sure that this project's ready for me to go. Or, hey, I'm starting out there in a couple of days. Can you meet me out there? Just to make sure everything goes smoothly that first day and we get off on the right foot. That's what we're there for. It's free. All you got to do is make the phone call. Okay, looking at the chat, I don't see anything else there. Go down a little farther. Okay, do primes have to pay travel time to and from job sites for trucking? Well, that's really in the agreement that you would make with them, and I'm assuming what you're asking there is, yeah, I got a job site. It's in Peoria, Illinois, but my office is in Bloomington, so I got to drive 30 minutes to get to the job site in Peoria. Is that part of what my pay is? Well, that's part of the contract that you would develop with that prime contractor. Most prime contractors are looking at paying you by the hour. And so, that half hour, you could say, hey, it's from my office to the job site or to the quarry or to the asphalt plant or whatever it might be. Just make sure that you put that in your proposal to them, what your pay is for. Is it for travel to and from? And then if they say, hey, no, we're not going to pay you for travel to and from, then you need to include it in what your hourly rate is for work, say, from the quarry to the job site, back to the quarry to the job site, and then home. Carol, does that answer your question there? Okay. Let's see, what district is Chicago? That is District 1, Region 1. Districts 2 and 3 is Region 2. Districts 4 and 5 is Region 3. Districts 6 and 7 are Region 4. And then Region 5 includes Districts 8 and 9. If you go to the IDOT website on their homepage, there is a link there that shows you all the outlines of those districts also. I could probably go to that. Get to the right screen here. Hang on with me. I'll find that for you. Oh, if I go to their home screen about IDOT regions, you can see District 1 and Region 1 is all in itself. It is basically probably the largest concentration of work within the state of Illinois. You also have the largest concentration of contractors and certified DBEs. You can see here's Region 2, 3, Region 4, Region 5. So that's where you'd find that kind of information. There's a lot of information out here, and I know we're going to have a couple of workshops later in November for I think there's going to be one on basics for the IDOT website, and then one that's a little bit more advanced. And so a lot more things will be covered in those in terms of the IDOT website and how to navigate it. Any other questions? Not seeing any other questions, but here again, I'll leave this up there. We will go down to our here. So if anybody, like I say, you get a copy of this, but if you want to write down some of that, there's a chance for you to do that. I'll hang on here, but otherwise I haven't got anything more to add to the presentation today. But look forward to working with all of you, and please don't hesitate to call us at any time about anything. If it's something that we don't handle on a technical side, and it's something that's more management or certification wise type of a question, we'll get you in touch with the right people. Again, thank you all for taking the time today. Hope it was informational to you, and it'll be a big help in being successful in working with the Department of Transportation.